I call the member for Noosa.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to respond to the 2023 budget. Firstly, before heading into specifics, it is appreciated that the cost of living has been a focus of this budget, and for many the electricity rebates and free kindy are very welcomed. However, there is a question of how this is funded, and I realise that the surplus and the royalties have been mentioned. But with a reported $1.721 billion increase in tax revenue, is this a case of taking in one hand from those that can ill afford, then provide it back on the other hand in the form of support? With a record net operating surplus of more than $12 billion, I appreciate efforts on paying down debt. However, given what it is costing in support and health services for increased poor mental and physical health due to the housing crisis and ongoing fallout from COVID, why is more not being injected into housing from this surplus? In studies of homelessness, the provision of housing actually costs governments and taxpayers less than the ramifications. In amongst the many non-location specific announcements welcomed is incentives for GPs and healthcare workers to relocate to Queensland, high visibility police patrols and improved access to emergency departments, surgery and mental health support, which we desperately need. However, the devil, as they say, is in the detail, namely where these will be funded, and in the coming weeks we hope to find out. Another plus is additional funding in areas that we have been advocating for in relation to capability and competency building across the public sector, as envisaged in the Coldrag report. Of importance is the increased role of the Queensland Public Sector Commission as a system leader to ensure those capabilities are developed. May the much-needed inquiries into the responses of government in relation to COVID, as governments around Australia and the world have done, as well the reasons for the housing crisis that took many years in the making. We have to assess these to avoid replicating any failings in the future. Now, on to Noosa specifics. Our wish list was actually quite small, as many of our majors have been completed, commenced or are in study or recommendation stages. This included from the Department of Transport and Main Roads the completion of the first stage of the Beckmans Road to Wanton bypass, with a new roundabout at the intersection, which everyone loves. It is fantastic, of Corroy and Beckmans Road, and the commencement of the replacement of 6 Mile Creek No. 7 Bridge. And again, it's really impressive. There's a lot of work gone in there. In addition, the enormous volumes of both capital and maintenance funding for the Kin-Kin-Pomona Road in response to the totally inappropriate volumes of heavy haulage on a road never built for. We continue to wait for a determination, and do you know it's been a year now waiting for that to be handed down from the courts to see an end to this nightmare, and I thank all who continue to assist. For those in progress, we have in Q-Trip $1.4 million for planning of Stage 2 of the Toronto bypass, which is currently in the final design phase between Noosa Council and TMR, and $9.2 million from a total of $22.5 million for the 6 Mile Bridge, with its completion predicted for mid-2024. Even though not in the Noosa electorate, the lack of movement on the Corroy intersections is of concern, and that's right on my border. My constituents, as well those in Nicklin, are daily at risk by these two notorious intersections, and clarification needs to be given as to why these remain unaddressed. Back to happy announcements. We had the sod turning for the construction of the new $13 million state-of-the-art school hall for our Noosa District State High School Pomona campus, which is due to be completed in readiness for the start of the 2024 school year. This is a great addition, and I thank Minister Grace and the department, and also Sunshine Beach State School is seeing a refurbishment of Block HA. However, our devastating disappointment was the omission of the Advanced Manufacturing Unit for Sunshine Beach State High. With the master plan for this bursting at the seams school completed, to not get started does not make sense, and they're actually turning students away because they just cannot take them for their studies in that particular manufacturing space. This is especially important as we have no TAFE to ensure alternatives for training are provided, as well job pathways, which this unit does. May we find that there is funding hidden somewhere for that detailed design and a reconsideration of the urgency. As we continue to wait the announcements for the future of the decommissioned TAFE site, it's been the longest journey, and I've been tracking this now for 9 years, so it's very frustrating. and the results from the feasibility study into a Noosa learning hub, the importance of ensuring funds are available for this in the next budget cannot be underestimated. The Noosa lost its TAFE as well as our uni campus. We need a hub. Pleasingly, it is wonderful that the Lake McDonald project is now back on track with nearly $1 million in this budget to get started out of the total $127 million to meet safety requirements. Now to health. I attended the official opening of the transportable units at Noosa Private Hospital, which operates under an agreement with Sunshine Coast Hospital and Health Service. This to triage patients coming into the emergency department, which has limited capacity, resulting in bypass mode, or should I say load share, being activated 20 hours a day. That's 20 hours a day. Given this adds to the ramping at SCU and Nambour hospitals, I just don't understand why government will not provide the requested longer lease to Ramsay so they can invest to expand the facility permanently to avoid all of this. This is a win-win if this is to happen for government as well as our community and the millions of visitors we receive who suffer from delayed ambulance times due to the bypassing to other hospitals, then they cannot afford to get back to Noosa. With the budget stating improved ambulance responsiveness and access to emergency department, here is a simple, no-cost solution. So, Minister, please simply extend the Noosa hospital lease. Even though there are funding allocations in a number of realms to Noosa for mental health, alcohol and other drug psychosocial services, as well residential rehabilitation, the amounts do not appear to be anywhere close to what is required. In addition, that only $28,000 is allocated for our electorate this year for palliative care state programs to service our needs is deeply concerning. Our communities continue to fundraise services such as our much-loved Katie Rose College, who each year require $2 million to provide essential end-of-life care. That again, there is no move to develop a fair and equitable model for the 7 hospices across Queensland, from the $55 million allocated to invest in community-based services for palliative care until 2026. The question remains,
order, members.
Why? Community-funded models deliver these services much more economically than a hospital, so this is another grassroots question that needs answering. And then we move on to the never-ending issue of housing, which I think I've spoken about every budget now for 5 years. My community appreciates the purchase of Janella Street last year for an affordable housing project and successful funding applications put forward, and look forward to when these can be announced, including the Rise by Bendigo project to build 4 units for families impacted by domestic violence. However, this is only a small part of what is needed. This budget outlined commitments across Queensland of 5,600 social and affordable home commencements via the HIF and 3,265 by June 2025 via the additional $1.1 billion. However, as we know and we've heard, this falls far short of what is required. QCOS's research stated a need for 11,000 new social and affordable homes for each year for 20 years. In their March 2023 report, that there is 150,000 households across Queensland with unmet housing needs. This includes 100,000 households who would be typically eligible for social housing. Where is the long-term housing strategy for Queensland that we have been requesting? And why, when we have a record surplus, are we not dedicating more to address this crisis right now? This has never been more important, especially with the 2032 Olympics only 9 years away, which will create further accommodation hardships. As well, the extra nearly 250,000 people that are predicted to move within 45 minutes of Noosa in the next decade. If there is not a solid strategy released quickly, we will see a catastrophe of proportions even worse than what is happening now. Given current urgencies, there is only $500,000 for specialist homelessness services for our area, nothing about needed emergency accommodation. The Department of Resources handed over a suitable site to Sunshine Coast Council 4 years ago, which still sits unused and about to go to tender. So what is really happening here?
Apologies, Member for Noosa. Can we just pause the clock? Members, there's far too much noise in the chamber. If you'd like to have a conversation, please take it outside. I call the member for Noosa.
Thank you. Add in the dire position regarding interest rate pressures, land tax and policy proposals driving mortgages and housing costs up, which also impact those renting. Why are we not putting in place a freeze on the land tax to the 2021 valuations as we have requested? There are so many whys in this actual budget. Now to our environment. Noosa is waiting for action in response to government studies and surveys as a result of years of advocacy. Many of these issues, such as the unsustainable volume of visitors to Noosa's North Shore and protecting our turtle habitats, do not require vast sums to resolve. Just action, and our community is really angry. Others, such as the better management of our Noosa River, do require increases to QPS, MSQ and DAF to police changes to laws, otherwise there is no point. Our national parks continue to bear the brunt of underfunding. The value-based management framework is welcome. However, what does it translate to on the ground? QPWS staff and volunteers continue to do an incredible job battling the impacts from the large volumes of visitors to our parks. It is wonderful these continue to be increased. However, we need the resources and legislation to manage appropriately. This includes a much-needed discussion as to whether the current parameters for ecotourism ventures are appropriate. With the volume of destruction we are seeing, it is vital that a Queensland independent EPA gets operational, as it has been 18 months since the first consultations. In addition, the recommendations from the review of powers and penalties under the EP Act need to translate into a tabling of new legislation to come into the House as soon as possible. Now to transport. Given that congestion and lack of access to public transport has escalated for Noosa, and that, as I mentioned before, there's a predicted 250,000 people coming to live within 45 minutes of Noosa, the importance of reducing the current and future loads on the M1 and surrounding networks cannot be understated. The North Coast Rail study is long overdue, and increases in rail and other forms of public transport is vital before the 2032 Olympic Games. To crime, as we've seen in the many inquiries, the contributors are complex and many. We've seen the results from inquiries where recommendations are not actioned. The funding required is enormous, and it's good to see the $132 million over 4 years dedicated to crime prevention and victim support. However, we need to see where these increased patrols and programs take place, as we don't want to keep funding specials in Noosa. Glaringly, there has been no mention in this budget of needed increases to support for our small to medium businesses. Given the ongoing hardships from lack of staff, increased rentals, inflations and monetary policy responses on interest rates, this is deeply concerning, as they are our backbone. Though, as part of the Tourism Experience Development Fund, monies have been awarded to Noosa RACV Resort and to construct an eco precinct and Kinkins Mayan Farm. Noosa Council, of course, will also benefit from further funding as part of the Community Stimulus Program for the McKinnon Drive Sports Facility, investigations into transit hubs and to assist with litter and illegal dumping. In conclusion, as always, there are winners and losers in budget and a lot of noise in this chamber. Ultimately, the glaring issue with this one is that we should have celebrated the surplus delivered from mining royalties with announcements that address our most urgent needs, including housing. I acknowledge the complexity of putting a budget together, and I congratulate the Treasurer and all of the very hard-working staff. It is not easy. However, I ask that the serious shortfalls identified be remedied, because, as you know, it is never too late. Thank you.